Siraith nodded.
Then choose. The word hung between them in the dusty air of the locked room, beneath the portrait of a king who once felt everything, beside the woman who was teaching him to feel again.
I choose to stay, Revan said. For now.
It was not a declaration of trust.
It was not surrender. It was the most powerful thing she had said since he found her in the dark. It was agency.
And for both of them, it changed everything. Varenthos had been dying for 2 centuries, and Siraith had been dying with it. The throne room was a cathedral of collapse. Vines thick as a man's wrist crawled through the shattered windows and wound themselves around pillars that had once held the banners of every vampire bloodline in the kingdom. The great chandelier, a masterwork of black iron and crystal that had taken 30 craftsmen 4 years to build, lay in pieces across the marble floor where it had fallen sometime during the 1st century of his exile.
He had watched it fall. He had felt nothing. That was the problem.
Siraith sat in his stone chair at the center of the ruin because the ruin was honest.
Crumbling walls did not pretend to be whole. Shattered glass did not pretend to shine. He respected that. He had stopped respecting almost everything else. He appeared to be a man in his early 30s. Tall. Lean.
Sharp aristocratic features cut from pale marble. Dark hair that fell past his jaw in a way that suggested he had not cared about his reflection in longer than most human family lines had existed. His eyes were the deep red-black of dried blood. And when he was still, which was nearly always now, he looked less like a living creature and more like a monument someone had carved to commemorate grief and then abandoned.
6 centuries he had lived.
6 centuries of watching the world change its clothes while wearing the same skin. The first 300 years he had ruled the coven with precision and something that might have been passion. The next 100 he ruled with discipline. The final decades before the coup he ruled with nothing at all, and Valdris, his advisor, his confidant, his betrayer, had seen the emptiness and used it like a blade. A king who cannot feel cannot rule. Valdris had said those words to the council. And Siraith had sat on this very throne and listened and known, with the cold clarity of a creature who had lost the ability to care, that Valdris was right.
So he did not fight.
They drove silver stakes through his palms and threw him from the gates of his own kingdom, and he walked into the Thornwall Mountains and sat down and did not stand up for a very long time.
That was 200 years ago. The wind shifted. Siraith did not react at first. Wind was wind.
It carried the scent of pine and wet stone and occasionally the iron tang of animal blood from the valley below. He dismissed it the way he dismissed everything, with the mechanical indifference of a clock that has forgotten why it ticks. Then it returned. Stronger. And his body responded before his mind could intervene. His pupils dilated. His fingers, motionless for 11 days, seized the armrests of the stone chair and the granite cracked beneath them like dry wood. His spine straightened. His lips parted. Something deep in his chest, something he had assumed was permanently dead, lurched. The scent was not iron. It was not common. It was older, richer, layered with a fragrance that tasted like memory itself, like standing in sunlight before sunlight became lethal, like the echo of a heartbeat that matched his own. Bloodbound. Every vampire knew the word. It lived in their oldest texts, their most sacred myths, their most desperate prayers. A human whose blood was mystically attuned to a single vampire. Not a food source. Not a servant. A key. The blood-bound bond, when completed through mutual ritual, amplified a vampire's power beyond comprehension. But that was not the part that mattered. The part that mattered, the part that every ancient text treated with something approaching reverence, was this. A bloodbound restored the vampire's capacity for human emotion. Joy. Sorrow. Love. Fear. The things that made existence bearable. The things that Siraith had lost so gradually he did not notice until they were gone, like a man going blind who only realizes it when someone asks him the color of the sky and he cannot remember. The scent pulsed on the wind like a second heartbeat. Siraith stood. His joints did not crack. His muscles did not protest. Vampire bodies did not decay. They simply waited, patient as stone, for a reason to move. He had not had a reason in 31 years. He had not left Varenthos in 31 years. He had not spoken in 2 centuries. He walked through the ruined hall, past the shattered chandelier, past the vine-strangled pillars, past the gates that still bore the scorch marks from the night they threw him out. The mountain air hit his face and he stopped, just for a moment, and breathed in the scent again.
Northwest. 40 miles. A human girl bleeding in the dark. His blood bound.
Siraith descended the mountain, and the night parted around him like it remembered who he was.
She woke to a sound that did not belong in her catalogue. Revan knew every noise this house made. The settling of the foundation at dusk.
The creak of the seventh stair under Marvena's uneven step. The distant clink of Thessaly's wine glass against the dining table at precisely 9 each evening. She had spent 3 years building an encyclopedia of sound, and in that encyclopedia there was no entry for what she heard now. The basement door, a reinforced oak slab 3 inches thick with 3 iron bolts that Marvena locked each night with a key she wore around her neck, was torn from its frame.
Not forced. Not broken slowly. Torn.
One sharp crack, precise as a surgeon's incision, and then silence so complete it swallowed the echo.
Revan sat up on the mattress.
Her heart was hammering but her body was still. Stillness was the only defense she had left, and she wielded it like a weapon.
Footsteps on the stairs. She stopped breathing.
These footsteps were wrong. Not wrong like a stranger's, which would have had weight and hesitation and the clumsy uncertainty of unfamiliar architecture.
These footsteps were silent. Not quiet. Silent.
She heard nothing, and yet she knew, with the animal certainty of prey in the presence of something far above it on the chain of existence, that something was descending toward her.
The darkness in her cell was absolute.
The painted window offered nothing tonight.
She could not see her own hands. Then she saw the eyes. Red. Deep. Old.
They caught no light because there was no light to catch, and yet they burned in the blackness like 2 embers pressed into the face of something ancient. They were fixed on her, and they did not blink.
"Who are you?" she whispered. The figure did not answer. Not immediately.
She could feel him looking, not at her, but at everything around her.
The chain.
The tin cup beneath the leaking pipe.
The bowl with its residue of cold porridge. The mattress with its mildew stains. The narrow window painted black.
He was taking inventory, cataloguing each detail with a thoroughness she recognized because she did the same thing.
She catalogued to survive.
He was cataloguing for a different reason, and with each detail he absorbed, the temperature in the cell dropped. Not metaphorically. The air grew cold enough that her breath became visible in the faint glow of those garnet eyes. When he spoke, his voice was low and carried an accent she could not place.
Something archaic. Something formal.
Something that sounded like it had been shaped by centuries of silence and was now being used reluctantly, like a rusted instrument pulled from a case. "I'm going to break this chain.
I am going to carry you out of this room.
And then you are going to tell me who did this." Revan did not move. She had imagined rescue 1,000 times in 3 years. She had constructed elaborate fantasies of magistrates and strangers and divine intervention, and she had dismantled every one of them because hope was a luxury that starving girls could not afford.
"Why?" she asked. He paused. The pause lasted only a moment, but in that moment something shifted in those ancient eyes. A crack in something vast. He did not know why. She could see it, even in the dark, even with nothing but those red embers to read. The question had reached past whatever mechanism drove him here and touched something underneath, something he had not expected to find. "Because," he said, and the words seemed to cost him something she could not name, "no creature should be kept like this. Not even by blood." He reached down and closed his hand around the chain. The iron links did not strain or stretch. They simply parted, cleanly, as though the metal recognized something in his grip that outranked its purpose. Revan did not scream. She did not cry. She had stopped crying at 17 and she was not going to start now for a stranger with red eyes and an accent from another century. She reached behind her, fingers finding the familiar gap between the stones, and pulled out the carved pendant. She pressed it against her chest where her heartbeat could hold it. "I am ready," she said. She weighed nothing. Siraith carried her through 40 miles of forest and mountain in the hours before dawn,
and the absence of weight in his arms enraged him in a way he could not categorize.
He had not felt rage in over a century. He had not felt anything.
And yet here it was, raw and jagged, triggered not by an enemy or a threat but by the simple biological fact that a 19-year-old girl weighed less than the chain he had just broken from her wrist.
She did not speak during the journey. She did not sleep.
She kept her eyes open and watched the trees pass overhead, and he realized after the first mile that she was memorizing the route.
Cataloguing landmarks. Counting turns.
Even now, even half-starved and carried in the arms of a creature she did not understand, her mind was building a map.
This did something to him. He did not know what to call it.
Varenthos materialized from the mountain fog like a memory surfacing through dark water. The fortress was enormous and broken, its towers cracked, its walls claimed by vine and weather. But ruin is not the same as death, and pockets of warmth still lived inside the stone. A kitchen with an iron stove that still functioned. A library whose 10,000 volumes had survived the centuries because books, unlike kings, do not bleed when they are betrayed. And a bedroom on the second floor with a fireplace that Siraith had never once lit because vampires do not need warmth.
He lit it now.
The wood caught quickly, and the flames climbed, and Siraith set Revan in the chair before the fire and stepped back.
She did not look at him. She looked at the flames.
For a long moment she simply stared, and he understood that he was watching a woman see fire for the first time in 3 years. The light moved across her face and illuminated what the darkness of the basement had hidden.
The hollows beneath her cheekbones.
The bruises on her arms in various stages of fading. The way her collarbones pressed against her skin like the frame of a house with nothing left inside it.
He brought food. Bread that he had stored for no reason he could remember. Cheese. Dried fruit. A cup of water.
He placed everything on the table beside her chair and stepped back again, farther this time, giving her the one thing he suspected she had not been given in years.
Space. She did not eat.
She turned those amber-gold eyes on him, and the firelight made them burn like something molten, and she asked the question that would define everything between them from this moment forward. What do you want from me?
He could have lied. 2 centuries ago he would have.
A king learns to speak in strategies, to reveal only what serves him. But something about the way she asked, not with fear but with the exhausted precision of a woman who has learned that every kindness has a price, made dishonesty feel like a second set of chains.
Your blood called to me, he said.
There is a bond.
Ancient.
I have read about it but never believed it was real.
It is called the blood-bound.
Your blood is attuned to mine in a way I do not fully understand.
He told her the truth. Part of it. He told her about the bond. He told her about the scent on the wind. He did not tell her about the prophecy. He did not tell her about Valdris.
He did not tell her that if the bond was completed, he would become the most powerful vampire in existence.
These omissions would cost him. But not tonight.
Revan studied him for a long time, reading him the way she read footsteps through floorboards, pausing his words for the weight of what was missing. Then she turned back to the fire and picked up the bread and ate.
Slowly. Methodically.
With her hands, because that was how she had eaten for 3 years and the habit had calcified into ritual.
She did not thank him. He did not expect thanks.
Gratitude implied debt, and he understood instinctively that this woman had been made to feel indebted for the basic act of existing for far too long. She fell asleep in the chair with the pendant clutched against her chest, her breathing shallow, her body curled inward as though even in sleep she was bracing for a blow that might come from any direction.
Siraith stood at the window and watched the tree line. The forest was still.
The wind carried nothing but pine and silence.
But he knew.
With the certainty of a creature who had survived 6 centuries by understanding how power works, he knew that an empty basement and a broken door would not go unnoticed.
Someone would come looking.
And when they did, they would find that the starving girl they had buried in the dark was no longer theirs to bury. The fire crackled behind him. Revan breathed. And Siraith stood guard over something he could not yet name but was unwilling to lose. Thessaly descended the basement stairs at 7 in the morning, as she did every Monday, carrying nothing.
She never brought food. That was Marvena's task.
Thessaly's weekly visit served a different purpose. She came to confirm that the foundation of her entire life was still chained to a water pipe.
The door was gone. Not open. Not unlocked. Gone.
The reinforced oak slab that had cost her 60 silver pieces, chosen specifically for its weight, and the 3 iron bolts that Marvena locked each night, lay in 2 pieces on the hallway floor.
The bolts were still intact.
The wood around them had simply been torn away, as though the door had been made of damp parchment and something had grown impatient with it.
Thessaly walked down the stairs.
Her heels were sharp, rapid, purposeful, the same cadence Revan had catalogued 1,000 times from below.
She reached the bottom step and looked at the empty cell.
The chain hung from the pipe, its final link pulled apart like warm taffy.
The mattress was still there. The tin cup.
The residue of porridge in the bowl.
The painted window.
Everything was exactly as it had been, except for the only thing that mattered.
Thessaly did not scream. She did not call for help.
She did not run upstairs or wake the household or do any of the things a normal person might do upon discovering that a prisoner had vanished from a locked room in a way that defied physical explanation.
She sat down on the bottom step and thought.
If Revan surfaced publicly, the forged competency documents would be examined by someone other than the magistrate Thessaly had been bribing for 3 years. The embezzled inheritance would be traced. The financial architecture she had built, every falsified ledger, every redirected payment, every carefully constructed lie, would collapse inward like a house built on rot.
She would be arrested. Marvena would be arrested.
The Varel name would become synonymous with a crime so intimate and so prolonged that no amount of social capital could survive it. Thessaly stood, smoothed her dress, and ascended the stairs. She found Marvena in the kitchen, preparing tea with the mechanical precision that characterized everything Marvena did.
Thessaly placed both hands on the counter and delivered the news in a single sentence.
The basement is empty. We have approximately 72 hours before this becomes a problem we cannot solve.
Marvena's hands stopped moving. Her expression did not change.
She set down the kettle and said, "How?"
"That is the wrong question," Thessaly said.
"The right question is what do we do now?" By noon, Thessaly had visited Magistrate Torren and reported with convincing distress that her ill sister had wandered from the house during the night in a state of confusion and might be a danger to herself. By 2, she had sent word to Orson Blackwell, a tracker whose reputation was built on finding people who did not wish to be found and whose discretion was guaranteed by the fact that most of his clients could not afford to have their reasons for searching examined. By evening, she had begun making quieter inquiries through channels that respectable women in Ilford did not acknowledge existed. She asked careful, oblique questions about creatures that might possess the strength to tear an oak door from iron bolts without leaving tool marks.
She did not yet know where these questions would lead her. But they would lead her somewhere very specific.
They would lead her to Valdris.
And that would change everything.
Meanwhile, Marvena descended the basement stairs alone.
She walked into Revan's empty cell and stood in the center of the room.
She picked up the broken chain and held it in both hands, running her thumb along the link that had been pulled apart. Her expression was unreadable.
Not angry. Not relieved. Not frightened.
Something else entirely, something that existed in the complicated space between a woman who had followed her sister's orders for 3 years and a woman who had kept a meticulous record of every single thing she had done.
Marvena sat down on the mildewed mattress.
She reached into the pocket of her dress and withdrew a leather journal, small, well-worn, its pages dense with her precise handwriting.
She opened it to a fresh page and wrote, "The audience does not see what she writes. Not yet.
But remember this journal."
On the 3rd day, Revan left the bedroom.
She moved through Varenthos the way she had moved through her cell, slowly, systematically, pressing her fingers against walls and counting doorways.
Mapping.
Building an internal architecture of this new space the way she had built one of the old. Siraith watched from a distance.
He did not follow her. He did not hover.
He positioned himself within earshot and let her move, because he understood, in the way that only another caged creature could understand, that the first thing a freed animal needs is the ability to walk without being watched.
She found the kitchen first.
She stood in the doorway for a long time, studying the iron stove, the shelves of dry stores, the copper pots hanging from hooks on the wall.
The next morning she cooked for herself.
Siraith heard her moving before dawn and came downstairs to find her standing over the stove, stirring porridge.
The same food Marvana had used as a weapon. She was reclaiming it. He knew this without being told.
"I need to do something with my hands," she said without turning around. "If I sit still too long I start counting again."
He did not ask what she counted. He already knew. On the 5th day, she found the library. She stopped in the doorway and did not move for a very long time.
10,000 volumes lined the walls from floor to ceiling, their spines cracked and dusty but intact. Siraith, standing at the end of the corridor, watched her shoulders change. Something in her posture shifted, opened, like a fist slowly unclenching.
"Can you read?" he asked. The question was not condescending.
It was careful, delivered with the same deliberate gentleness he used when he set food on her table and stepped back.
He did not know what her sisters had allowed her. He did not want to assume. Revan's answer came quietly. "My father taught me."
"My sisters told me I had imagined it." She crossed the room and pulled a book from the shelf. It was old, leather-bound, a history of the northern provinces written in formal script. She opened it to the first page and read aloud. Her voice was steady, fluent, confident. The words came without hesitation, without stumbling, with the natural cadence of someone who had not merely learned to read but who loved it, who had carried the memory of language through 3 years of darkness like an ember hidden in cupped hands.
It was the first time Siraith had heard Revan sound sure of anything. And something happened in his chest. Faint, distant, like blood returning to a limb that had been numb so long he had forgotten it existed. A flicker of something warm in a cavity that had been hollow for 2 centuries. The bond was working.
Her presence, her voice, her proximity was reaching into the dead architecture of his emotional capacity and touching wires that had not carried current since before Valdris spoke his name to the council.
He said nothing. He was not ready to name it.
But he felt it, and the feeling itself was so foreign that it frightened him more than any enemy ever had. The days developed a rhythm. Siraith taught Revan the layout of Arenthos, showing her the passages that were safe and the sections where the stone had grown unstable.
She memorized everything after being told once.
He showed her the well in the courtyard, the root cellar beneath the kitchen, the balcony on the eastern tower where the sunrise could be watched from the shadows. She absorbed it all with that relentless, quiet intelligence that he was beginning to understand was not a product of her captivity but the thing that had survived it. One evening she cooked a meal from the dry stores and set 2 places at the table.
Siraith sat across from her because she had set the place and it seemed important.
She ate slowly, methodically, the way she always ate.
Halfway through the meal she looked up.
"Do you eat?"
"Not food," he said. Neither of them looked away. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. It was loaded, dense with the awareness of what he was and what she was and the ancient thread that connected them. The tension between them was not romantic. Not yet.
It was the tension of 2 deeply damaged beings occupying the same space and trying, with enormous care, not to break each other. Revan finished her meal. She set down the bread and looked at his hands, which were resting on the table. And for the first time she seemed to notice the scars. They were old, silver-white, one in the center of each palm. Neat. Deliberate. Not the scars of an accident but of something done with purpose. "What happened?" she asked. Siraith turned his hands over and looked at the marks as though he had forgotten they were there. "The night I was exiled. The council drove silver stakes through my palms before they threw me from the gates. A ritual. Symbolic. The hands that held the crown made unworthy to hold anything." Revan was quiet for a moment. Then she lifted her own hands and held them out, wrists upward. The scars from the shackles were still visible, pale and ridged against her skin. 3 years of iron pressed against the same spot. "We match," she said. It was not a joke. There was no humor in her voice. It was recognition, the simple, devastating acknowledgement that damage had shaped them both into the same language and that they could read each other because of it. Siraith looked at her scarred wrists and then at her amber-gold eyes, and the flicker in his chest grew stronger. He still could not name it. But it was there, And it was growing, and for the first time in 200 years he did not want it to stop.
This becomes important later.
The locked room was on the third floor of the eastern wing, behind a door that had swollen shut with 2 centuries of moisture and neglect. Revan found it on her 9th day at Varenthos because Revan found everything. She mapped spaces the way other people breathed, compulsively, completely, unable to leave a corridor unexplored or a door untested.
Her fingers found the latch. The wood resisted.
She pressed her shoulder against it, and the door gave with a groan that echoed through the empty hallway like a confession.
The room was small. A study, perhaps, or a private chamber. Dust lay thick as velvet on every surface. A desk. A chair.
A window with its glass still intact, clouded with grime but unbroken.
And on the wall opposite the door, a portrait. Revan stopped breathing.
The painting was large, nearly floor to ceiling, rendered in oils that had darkened with age but not enough to obscure what they depicted. A man seated on a throne of black stone, wearing a crown of black iron that sat on his dark hair like it had grown there. He was surrounded by figures in dark formal attire, advisors or courtiers, their faces painted with varying degrees of deference. But the man on the throne commanded the entire canvas. His posture was straight, assured, radiating the kind of authority that does not need to announce itself.
His features were sharp and aristocratic. His skin was pale marble. His eyes were bright. Not the dead garnet she knew.
These eyes burned with something vital, something present, something that looked like it might be purpose or conviction or the kind of power that comes from caring deeply about the thing you protect.
He looked like someone who feels. Revan heard him before she saw him.
Or rather, she did not hear him, which was how she always knew he was close.
The absence of sound at the doorway behind her. "Who is this?" she asked, though she knew.
Siraith stood in the doorway, and for the first time since she had met him, he looked away from her. He looked at the painting, and his expression was not the careful blankness she had grown accustomed to.
It was something rawer.
Something that resembled grief, if grief could be felt by a creature who was only just relearning what grief was. "Someone I used to be," he said. Revan did not push.
She waited.
She had learned in the basement that silence, given enough space, fills itself. People talk when the quiet becomes unbearable.
Even vampires. Siraith entered the room and stood before the painting. He was quiet for a long time.
"His name was Valdris," he said, and the name came out like a splinter being pulled from old wood.
He pointed to a figure standing at the right hand of the throne. Tall. Lean.
A face that was handsome in the way that polished blades are handsome, all edge and no warmth.
"My advisor. My closest confidant.
I trusted him for 3 centuries. The story came not as a monologue but in fragments, pulled from him by the painting and by Revan's steady, patient presence. He told her about the early years, when he ruled the coven with something he now recognized as passion. How the centuries eroded that passion incrementally, so gradually that he did not notice until it was gone. How a vampire's emotional capacity is not infinite but rather a resource that depletes with age, like a lamp burning through its oil over centuries instead of hours. How Valdris watched this erosion and waited. How Valdris went to the council and spoke those words that became the hinge on which everything turned.
"A king who cannot feel cannot rule."
He was right, Siraith said, and Revan heard no bitterness in the words, only the hollow acknowledgement of a fact.
"I sat on that throne and I knew he was right. I could not feel loyalty to my people. I could not feel anger at injustice. I could not feel fear of losing what I had built."
And a king who fears nothing protects nothing.
He told her about the silver stakes, the gates,
the long walk into the mountains, the 31 years of sitting in a stone chair in a ruined hall, not because he was waiting for something but because he had no reason to stand. Then he told her about the bond.
"It is already working," he said, and his voice changed.
The archaic formality softened into something more vulnerable, more uncertain, like a man stepping onto ice he is not sure will hold. "Since I brought you here, I have begun to feel things I have not felt in centuries.
Small things. The anger when I carried you and you weighed nothing. Something in my chest when you read aloud.
It terrifies me, Revan." Not because the feelings are painful, but because I had forgotten what it costs to care whether something survives.
He paused. Then he told her about the prophecy.
The ancient texts that spoke of a blood-bound and her bonded vampire as a fulcrum point, a hinge of destiny. They would either resurrect the old kingdom or destroy everything that remained.
The texts did not specify which.
The outcome depended on choices not yet made. He did not tell her about the right of dominion. He did not tell her that Valdris would kill her to harvest her blood. He kept this from her deliberately, telling himself it was to protect her, knowing somewhere beneath the surface that it was also to protect the fragile, growing thing between them that he could not yet name.
These omissions would be confronted. But not tonight. Revan absorbed all of it.
She stood before the portrait of the man Siraith used to be and processed every word with that devastating, methodical intelligence, turning each piece over, examining its edges, fitting it into the architecture of understanding she was building.
Then she spoke. So I am not just a person to you.
I am a weapon. The pain that crossed Siraith's face was the most human he had looked in the entire story. It moved through his features like weather, cracking the marble, breaking the stillness, and for a single moment he was not an ancient creature or an exiled king. He was a man who had been accused of something true and felt the wound of it. You are a person, he said. The bond is a fact. What I do with it is a choice. And I am choosing to let you heal.
Revan studied him for a long time.
Her amber-gold eyes moved across his face the way they moved across rooms, reading every surface, cataloguing every detail, searching for the thing that did not belong.
She did not find it. Because he was telling the truth. Most of it. I believe you, she said. But I will not be kept again. By anyone. For any reason.
If I stay here, I stay because I choose to.
Not because of a bond. Not because of a prophecy. Because I decide. Siraith nodded.
Then choose. The word hung between them in the dusty air of the locked room, beneath the portrait of a king who once felt everything, beside the woman who was teaching him to feel again.
I choose to stay, Revan said. For now.
It was not a declaration of trust.
It was not surrender. It was the most powerful thing she had said since he found her in the dark. It was agency.
And for both of them, it changed everything.
The perimeter ward shattered at midnight.
Siraith felt it like a crack in his own ribcage, a vibration in the ancient stonework that meant something had crossed the boundary markers he had set a century ago, not to keep enemies out but to warn him if anything was foolish enough to approach. He was on his feet before the vibration faded, moving toward the gates with a speed that made the air ripple behind him.
What he found was not an army.
It was one vampire, kneeling in the courtyard with both hands raised, palms forward, in the old gesture of surrender that had not been used since before Valdris dissolved the formal military codes. The vampire was broad-shouldered and battle-scarred, with the bearing of a soldier who had never fully left the field.
His hair was shorn close to his skull. His jaw was set.
His eyes, pale amber, were fixed on Siraith with an expression that contained decades of searching compressed into a single moment of recognition. My king, Cael Drennan said. Siraith had not heard that title spoken aloud in 200 years.
It hit him differently now than it would have a month ago. A month ago it would have been meaningless.
Now, with the bond slowly restoring color to his emotional landscape, the words carried weight.
They carried memory.
Stand up, Cael.
Cael stood.
He was trembling, which was remarkable because Cael Drennan was 3 centuries old and had, by reputation, never trembled before anything. I have been looking for you for 4 to 7 years, Cael said. I need to tell you 2 things, and neither of them is good.
They moved inside.
Siraith led Cael to the kitchen because it was warm and because the throne room was rubble and he refused to receive news of his kingdom standing among its wreckage. Cael sat at the table where Revan ate her meals and delivered his information with military precision. The first piece, Valdris's coven was fracturing. His rule, built on the argument that emotionless efficiency was superior to passionate leadership, had produced exactly the kind of kingdom that argument implied.
Cold. Functional. Soulless.
Entire bloodlines had defected over the past century, scattering into the outer territories as rogues, choosing exile over obedience to a king who governed through fear and bureaucratic control. The coven was held together by habit and threat, and both were wearing thin. The second piece, delivered with visible dread. Valdris knows about the bloodbound. Siratha's hand, resting on the table, went still. How? Cale's account was precise. A woman in Eelford, human, wealthy, politically connected, had begun making inquiries through dark channels about creatures with the strength to tear reinforced doors from iron bolts. These inquiries passed through 3 intermediaries before reaching a vampire broker who recognized their significance and brought them directly to Valdris's court.
The woman had offered a bargain.
She would provide the bloodbound's exact location in exchange for one guarantee: the permanent elimination of a girl named Revan Varel. She does not care about the bond or the prophecy or the coven, Cale said. She cares about an inheritance. She wants her sister dead.
Thessaly.
The name moved through Siratha's mind like venom through a vein.
He had known someone would come.
He had not expected the threat to arrive wearing the face of family. Valdris agreed immediately. Cale continued.
He has dispatched a hunting party. 12 soldiers from his personal guard. They crossed the eastern border 3 days ago.
I estimate 4 days before they reached the Thornwall range.
Siratha stood. His response was immediate, absolute, and wrong. We leave tonight.
I will take Revan deeper into the mountains, beyond the Gravale Pass.
Valdris's soldiers will not follow that far.
We disappear.
And then what? Cale asked. He will keep searching. He will always keep searching.
You know what a bloodbound means to him, Siratha.
He needs her blood for the right of dominion.
As long as she exists and he knows she exists, there is no distance far enough. Then I will deal with Valdris after she is safe. She will never be safe. Not while he holds the throne. The argument was building toward a conclusion that Siratha was not ready to face when a voice spoke from the doorway.
No. The word was quiet. It was not shouted. It was not dramatic.
It was spoken with the calm, measured tone of a woman who had spent 3 years listening to decisions being made about her life through floorboards and had decided, with absolute finality, that those days were over.
Revan stood in the kitchen doorway.
She was wearing a shirt she had found in the fortress wardrobe, too large for her, sleeves rolled to her elbows, the scars on her wrists visible. Her amber-gold eyes moved from Siratha to Cale and back again.
She had been listening. Of course she had been listening. Listening was the thing she did better than anyone alive.
I spent 3 years having decisions made for me in a room I could not leave, she said. Her voice was steady but her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her thighs and kept talking. You will not move me like a piece on a board.
Not you. Not Valdris.
Not Thessaly. If they are coming, then we prepare. If there is a throne to be reclaimed, then reclaim it. But you will not hide me.
The kitchen was silent.
Cale Drennan looked at this gaunt, scarred, shaking girl who weighed nothing and had been chained to a pipe 2 weeks ago, and something crossed his face that might have been awe.
She sounds like a queen, Cale said. Siratha did not smile. Not yet. The muscles required for that expression were still remembering how to work.
But something in his face shifted, a softening around the eyes, a release of tension in the jaw, as though a question he had been carrying for a very long time had just been answered.
She sounds like herself, he said. They had 4 days. They used every hour.
Cale spread maps across the kitchen table and began listing rogue bloodlines in the outer territories. Revan sat across from him and started naming them first. The Valtheris bloodline, displaced 14 months ago. The Drossenval line, their elder council dissolved for sheltering children. The Tessavain, the Cretheri, the Bellanok. Name after name, pulled verbatim from conversations she had absorbed through floorboards for 3 years.
Cale stared at her.
Siratha did not.
He had watched her mind work since the first night. 3 bloodlines answered Cale's summons.
On the 3rd night, Siratha intercepted Valdris's hunting party in the mountain pass.
12 elite soldiers. He dismantled them in 4 minutes. He returned before dawn.
For a brief, golden moment, the threat seemed over. That evening, Revan sat before the fire and asked what it felt like, the emotions returning. Siraith was quiet for a long time. Like drowning in reverse, he said.
She touched his scarred hand. He did not pull away. Then the perimeter ward detonated. Not a hunting party. A full council guard. 40 soldiers.
And at their head, Valdris himself, with Thessaly beside him.
The fight in the great hall was brutal. Siraith was faster, stronger, sharpened by the incomplete bond. He drove Valdris to his knees. It appeared over.
Then Valdris produced a vial of dark liquid. Revan's blood, collected by Mavenna during 3 years of beatings, delivered by Thessaly as part of their bargain.
Valdris drank it.
The partial right of Dominion activated.
Stolen power surged through him. He threw Siraith through a stone wall. The guard closed around Revan. She did not run.
She stepped forward, into the center of the hall, and spoke.
Not to Valdris. To the council.
She named every bloodline he had betrayed, every family destroyed, every child who disappeared. 3 years of listening, weaponized with surgical precision. Doubt entered the room like a draft. Then she turned to Siraith, pulling himself from rubble.
She held out her hand. I choose this. Not because I have to. I am not a weapon. Not a burden. I am a door. And I am opening it. She offered her wrist. He bit gently. The bond completed. The effect was cataclysmic.
The bond was never meant to be taken by force.
It was meant to be given.
Valdris's stolen power shattered like glass, draining from him in seconds. He collapsed, looking old for the first time. Siraith stood over him. You said I could not feel.
You were right. But she gave that back to me.
And the first thing I feel, Valdris, is pity. Thessaly, dragged forward by Kale, saw Revan standing unchained and unbroken.
You were supposed to be nothing, she whispered. I know, Revan said. I do not forgive you. But I release you from my mind.
Among Thessaly's belongings, they found Mavenna's journal. 3 years of meticulous entries documenting every cruelty. It became the evidence that restored Revan's inheritance.
Revan opened the pendant.
Inside was a single drop of her mother's blood, preserved in crystal.
Her father had known what she was. What she would become.
The pendant was proof of the blood-bound lineage, left so she would understand her own worth. She converted the Varel estate into a sanctuary. She rebuilt Varenthos with Siraith, stone by stone. She sat at the coven's long table and did what she had always done best.
She listened. Then she spoke.
The story closes on Revan at the window, moonlight catching her amber-gold eyes. Siraith stands behind her, close but not touching.
She leans back into the space where he stands. Do you still count? He asks. She is quiet for a moment. No.
I stopped counting the day I chose to stay.
Some doors are open from the outside. But the ones that matter most only open from within.
The question is not whether Revan was saved. The question is whether the real cage was ever the basement at all, or the belief, planted so young and so deep, that she deserved the dark. And if the lock was always inside her, then the key was too. She simply needed someone patient enough to help her find it.